Morning, everyone. So you're not going to hear me through the speakers because we're trying something new this year, which is we're going to record this. So this mic is for the recording, but can you guys hear me all right? In the back, can you hear me all right? Excellent. First thing I'm going to do is take a selfie because my daughter's in 9th grade. She's in D.C. right now. And she said, I have to do this or she'll never speak to me again. And teenagers can be very difficult that way, you know. So the hard part's getting all of you in it. So let's see if I do this right. Oh, how about that? Looks good, right? Excellent. You guys have done this before, haven't you? I can tell. Right. So back when I grew up, which was the 1930s, every assembly like this or any public gathering really opened in prayer. And as you'll hear, I ended up as the chaplain at a prison camp. So I did quite a lot of that in 2.5 years. Prisoners pray a lot. So I'm going to start. I'm going to do that for us, all right? Dear Lord, I thank you for all these nice young folks that have come to hear me. Not quite sure if they had a choice, but I pray that you would bless this time together. Maybe we'll learn a little bit about the way that you work through history, and maybe it'll be a bit of enjoyment too. Thank you for your many blessings, Lord, and we pray in your name. Amen. So, as it says up there, my name is Richard Gray. Some of you might know my grandson Hayden, who's sitting over here. He's going to be my tech support. Okay, well done, Hayden. Hopefully that thing won't burst into flame at some point. This is a little bit about my life, a story of the war. Back in the mid 20th century, there was only one war. So when you say the war, everybody knew which one you meant. But I meant World War II. And that tank is a World War II tank that we'll learn a little bit more about today. So I'm going to keep it as dry and as dull as possible. I heard that's what you guys like super arcane little facts. Is that right? That's what Mr. Gow told me. See, he might have been telling me a porky there. They call that a porky pie in England. Okay, well, I'll try to make it a little interesting, but we'll see how I get on. Let's see. Hayden, you want to start with the first slide? So some of you might recognize this country. Does it look familiar to you? My story. See, I'm not sure how much cord I have here. My story went all over the world, but it started here in a little corner of Missouri. Went out here to California, went back to Iowa, went down to Louisiana, up through Chicago to New Jersey, and that's when the story began. We started. A lot of my friends, when you get older, you tend to tear up a lot. A lot of my friends died for that flag. They were friends from high school, kind of just like the guys sitting around you, and that's how the war began. And but you should always respect that flag, not because of what it is. It's just a piece of cloth, right, with a design on it, but what it stands for. You cannot imagine what people have done to protect that flag so that kids like you can come here to an assembly and hear an old guy ramble on about his time in the war, right? It's what has been done for that flag, so it is always worthy of respect. Where was I? Let's start. Yeah, what's the next slide there, Hayden? So a place called the Ozarks is in Missouri. It's got some beautiful land, a bit like New Hampshire or Maine or some parts of Massachusetts. Like a lot of parts of the country, especially back then, it was extremely poor. As you can see from this picture over here, not everyone had names like Sweet Tater and Sunflower, but some families did. Mine didn't. It was just me and my sister Helen and my mom and dad, just the four of us. So I was born in 23, but some of you might have heard of something called the Depression, which happened in the 30s, started in 29, and that was pretty bad. Nobody really had much to eat, and especially in the center of the country where I was, there was something called the Dust Bowl, where all the grain that was made for everybody in the country, all of a sudden there was no water for several years. And so a lot of people, like my family, had to leave. So I think we have a picture of where we went to. Everybody back then went to California. That was where the opportunity was. So why don't you give us our next slide there? Whoa. Okay. Let's see. Any other slides? Did we miss a few? What's the next one? That's all right. Go back to the one of the country. See, that's why these things are fun. You never know what's going to happen. Usually the technology doesn't work. That's kind of a given. But aside from that, it's kind of like watching live TV. So I was here, right, in Missouri. We had some family out in California, so we went out here, a little place called Eagle Rock, which I've heard today is full of $1 million condos, but at the time it was just more dirt. But it was dirt that you could farm. They had introduced irrigation, right? You guys know what that is, where they bring water in, and you can grow plants, which you couldn't grow before. California's a bit of a desert, but they found ways to use some of the water in the ocean. It seemed like a great thing to do, so we went on out there in our old Model T, and we were there about 6 months, and my dad died. I was, how old are you guys? You're kind of 11, 12? That's exactly how old I was. I was 11 years old. My dad was what seems like today to me a young man. He was in his early 30s, but they didn't know as much about heart disease then as they do now. So he was walking down a country road and fell over dead. I went to get the doctor, but it was a long way, and I went the wrong direction anyway. But in any case, middle of the Depression, so my mom, and moms didn't really work then, didn't really know how to work. She was left with 2 kids and nothing to do to raise them, so we moved all the way back here where we had an aunt and an uncle in Nebraska. My uncle worked for Swift's Premium. They make a lot of the bacon that you guys eat. You guys like bacon? Hayden does. He eats it by the pound. They were based there in Iowa, and he had a good job, so they took us in. You know, that kind of happened back then. If somebody didn't have work, if you're a family, well, you just moved into the house, and if there wasn't a bedroom, which there wasn't, sleep on the couch or whatever, right? You do whatever it takes. So they did, and we really appreciated that. I went through middle school, or what they called then junior high, and started in high school. I tried to get what work I could, but at age 13 or 14, what can you do really? I worked as an exterminator for a while. You guys know what that is? They actually called it a termite treater on my discharge paper. I killed bugs. There are a lot of bugs in Iowa. I didn't enjoy that quite so much. What I did enjoy was playing the clarinet. Any of you guys in band or orchestra or choir? And we have a distinguished band director back here at the back, Mr. Kazanjian, who also works with Scouts here in town. Hayden's Boy Scouts and Beckett's Cub Scouts. He's a second grader. Mr. Kazanjian oversees all that. So he's an important person. Be nice to him. But there was not much place to play the clarinet in Iowa in the 1930s, except one place. And besides Nick, is there anyone else who knows what that place would be? What do you think? Army, yeah, the National Guard. So technically the Army is for the country, and each state has its own National Guard, like Massachusetts has a National Guard that reports to the governor. So I said, sure, why not? They gave me, 50 cents a week, which was good money back then. My mom sure appreciated it. The only job she had was demonstrating electrical appliances like toasters, because no one knew how to use electricity, right? No one knew what an electric iron was. So she would go out to these farms and she'd say, well, this is an iron, plug it in, this is how you use it. But, she didn't make much more money than that. So it was a great thing. I was happy as a clam. I was a little older than you guys now. I was in high school. It was 1939. Not much going on in the country, right? Certainly the country wasn't at war. I mean, Europe was always at war. Some guy named Hitler had just invaded Poland, but what did that matter to me? I lived in Iowa, right? And I can tell you back then, nobody in America wanted to go to a war. We had been through World War I, where actually Hayden's great-grandfather was an ambulance driver. And that was a terrible war. And everybody in America said, look, we're all set, right? As you might say in New England, we got an ocean here, we got an ocean here. We don't care what happens anywhere else in the world. We are not going to war again. That was 1939. So why not, right? So I think we might have some pictures here. We got to wear uniforms. There we go. That's me in my uniform right there. They call this a belly stabber tie. You see it doesn't go all the way down to your waist. And right there you'll see some of the same emblems I'm wearing today. It was fun. We got to march in the parades, like the one we're going to have here Monday, hopefully, if the rain holds off. It was good fun. You'd go there once a week, maybe a couple nights, play the clarinet, get paid money. Worked for me, right? What's our next one? Things kind of started evolving then. We were part of the National Guard, and all of a sudden, early on, 1941, in February 7th, for some reason, the president made the National Guard part of the Army. They federalized us. And we found out later why. But at the time, again, look how old I was, right? I was a high school student, basically. I didn't care. You could say we're all what they call buck privates. There's nothing on our uniforms, right? There are no stripes. There are no buttons. There was nothing. We were buck privates. But we didn't care. This was in Louisiana. There was a little camp down there. Went to basic training. We'd go sing it. We all sang as well as played. So we'd sing in churches around the area. And it was a lot of fun. Let's see. What do we got next there, Hayden? This is the kind of training we did. It was 1939. Country wasn't at war. Hadn't been at war since World War I. So what was all the equipment we had? World War I, right? That's a single-shot bolt-action rifle. You can get excellent marksmanship with that rifle, but you can't get rounds off very fast. So World War I, state-of-the-art. 1939. What does that mean? Oh, we're not on fire or anything. Oh, phew, that was close. Whew. Look at the helmets, right? That's a World War I helmet, isn't it? A gentleman named Higgins, actually, from Worcester, had a place called Higgins Armory. He helped design that helmet. And it's all World War I stuff. But it didn't matter. We weren't at war, right? We were just training. They sent us off. This was, June. And they said, go down. You'll be back in Louisiana. You'll be down there for 4 or 5 months. You'll be back in time for Christmas, right? So our mom said, well, that's good, because 5 months is a long time, right? Well, apparently not as long as 5 years, which is what it turned out to be. Because while we were down there, what's our next slide here? Yeah, we were down there. It was a Sunday morning. And just like some of your parents might never forget where they were on 9/11, anybody that was alive during Pearl Harbor will never forget it. Your body does a funny thing. It flushes your entire body with adrenaline, which works on your cerebral cortex, and it burns into your brain who you were with, what you were wearing, every single thing about the moment. So I can tell you where we were. We were singing at a church. It was a Sunday morning, so we were doing a little gospel quartet. We came back. We were trying to get into the base, and there was a guard there. We said, is there a guard here for? There's never been a guard here. He asked for our papers, and we said, is this some kind of drill? He said, it's not a drill. Our nation was attacked. We just lost about 2,000 soldiers and sailors in Hawaii, which you might as well have dropped a boulder on my head. It hit me like a bolt out of the blue. We weren't even at war with Japan. We were looking at Germany, right? Germany was invading Poland and the Rhineland and the Sudetenland and all these other places. Japan? What? Are you kidding me? Well, yes, it happened. And so December 7th, 1941, guess who were the only U.S. soldiers in uniform? Right? A bunch of Iowa farm boys, 16, 17 years old, down in Louisiana for a few months of training. So didn't really work out that way. Within weeks, we were on board a train. We had no idea where we were going. That's when we went to Chicago and to Fort Dixon, New Jersey. Every soldier in America went through Fort Dix, New Jersey. And a few weeks after that, we were on a boat heading over for the largest amphibious invasion ever started. But we didn't know any of that. You don't know, right? You just go where you're told. You're sort of like a cow in a herd, right? And they kind of, in fact, half the time we rode in rail cars, not the kinds with the big seats and the Wi-Fi. No, I mean like the kind you put horses in. That's, we were soldiers, we were young. That's what you did. So what have we got next here, Hayden? I started keeping a journal. This is January 12th, 1942. By this time, we were in Fort Dix, which is in New Jersey. We'd go down to New York every while. You could go into the city on a bus for 10 cents, get a sandwich for a quarter. It's kind of fun then. I kept that all the way until we shipped out, at which point they take away your diaries. They take away everything personal in case you get captured, which happened. So we still have that. And my son, Hayden's dad, and the kids hopefully are going to go down to D.C., where the 8th graders are, and give this to the Library of Congress, along with all the telegrams I sent home to my mom from prison camp and all the letters and a bunch of other stuff, some of which you'll see. So we can flip on. I'm trying to keep us moving here because I could go on forever. As my daughter-in-law will tell you, that I won't point her out. She'll be embarrassed. This is Coleraine in Northern Ireland. We were new to the war. The British have been fighting since September 1st, 1939, right, when Hitler invaded Poland. So they knew what they were doing. They had been fighting at that point, clearly, years, right? And we had a pretty good relationship with the Brits, never mind the War of 1812, where they came in and sacked our Capitol building in the White House and set it on fire, which I think was a little unsportsmanlike. This time, as they say in war, the enemies of your enemies are your friends. So Britain said, come on over. Stage through Britain. Come to Northern Ireland. We can put you up in all these little towns like Coleraine. So this was our unit. This is the 168th Infantry. That's this little pin I'm wearing here. It's got a rainbow on it because in World War I we were part of the Rainbow Division. And it's got a palm tree, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'm in the back there in the band. You can't really see me, but that was our unit. So we got taken in by families. They adopted us. We would just be part of the family. We would wash the dishes, and we would eat together. We'd go to church with them. They really just took us in like we were family, which was a lot of fun. In fact, my son and daughter-in-law went over to Northern Ireland to that very town not too many years ago and looked up the girl I lived with, whose family I lived with, I should say. We were both young at the time, but she was surprised to see my son because he looks almost exactly like me. She almost fainted dead away. But anyway, let's see where we are next. So now I think I'm getting dry here. I don't notice any signs of life. Are you guys alive? You awake? Okay. Anybody enjoying it? Okay. Anybody want to throw out a question so far? How about you, my friend? You got a question? Anything? Any questions? Oh, I know your dad. You must have a question. No? Yes, question. I was born in 1923, and my wife was born in 1928. Yes, sweetheart? That's a great question. I played every kind of clarinet there was. That's a really excellent question. Most clarinets are the B-flat clarinet. I played the E-flat clarinet, which was nobody else could play it. So I got all these solos in band because I could play the E-flat clarinet, and I got an extra 5 cents a week because it was special pay, kind of like hazardous duty pay, because you can really squeak on an E-flat alto, not an alto, but an E-flat clarinet. Okay, so we'll do more questions at the end, if that's all right. Right? Remind me that you two had your hands up first. Right. Okay. So here we are again. World War I gear. Look at the helmet. World War I helmet. And look at that training. Does that look like intensive training? Like you're about to get shipped into a battle? No. I mean, look at the guy's expression. Say there, that looks like a pretty good shot, son, but you might want to check your windage. It was all very, collegial. And, oh, I love the spats. They call them puttees. You see these things? These white things? There's your shoes and there's your pants. And all from World War I. Right? We're now in World War II. War has started. We still got all this stuff from World War I. Bolt action rifle. Single shot. Meanwhile, Germans have state-of-the-art 50 caliber machine guns that can put out 1,200 rounds a minute, and each round would take down a horse, right? So things didn't end well, as you will see. So so you'll be number 3 at the end, right? Remember your number. Okay. What do we got here, Hayden? You might say, why is there a band in an army? Soldiers get bored. A lot of people say being a soldier is 99% boredom and 1% sheer terror. The 1% is when you're in battle. This is part of the 99% is when you're sitting around, maybe doing training, going from one place to another, blah, blah, blah. So bands help keep morale up. They help keep entertained the soldiers. Here we are practicing in Scotland. You see this is our mascot little dog here at the corner. And this is, you can just barely see my nose. I'm the second one in the clarinets there. It was actually a very good band. There were a lot of people who took playing really seriously, and in fact went on to have careers in music after the war, as I did. Okay, Hayden, what do we got next? So, speaking of old technology, America hadn't been at war for a long time. They knew these things like tanks were coming. There were these kind of weird new captains like Captain George Patton who thought tanks were the way of the future, but nobody paid much attention to him. So they said, look, how about this? General Stuart. Tanks were named after Civil War generals, and I think this one might have seen duty in the Civil War. That does not look like state-of-the-art technology, does it? It looks like it kind of went through an iron factory and got some glued on the side as it came through. Check out, they call this a squirrel rifle. You see that? 37 millimeters. How much in inches is 37 millimeters? Say 40 multiplied by 4. 1.6 inches. That was the shell that came out of it, right? I mean, you might use that for a really big deer or something. That was what we had. We actually had the Sherman tanks, which is one you saw at the beginning. But the British General Montgomery, was having a pretty hard time on the other side of Africa, and we shipped him all of our brand new Sherman tanks. So this is what we had. Go on, Hayden. Got to get to the prison camp. That's the exciting part. So this is the M3 General Lee. So a couple things about tank design. This is the part I'll try to make geeky for you. Tanks should be low to the ground, right? I'll show you a German tank, which is about this far to the ground. See how tall that thing is? What does it mean if you're tall in a battle? What does that make you? A target. That's what it makes you. You're a target. They can see this thing coming from miles away. This is an actual quote from some of the soldiers. It looked like a cathedral coming down the road. And see, you still got your 37 millimeter squirrel rifle on the top, which does absolutely nothing. And they said, look, we'll give you a bigger gun. How about this one? That's a bigger gun, right? That's good, right? Except, do you notice this thing? It's a turret, but it doesn't traverse. It doesn't go around in a circle like the one on the top. See, that goes around in a circle, right? So what does this mean? That means you have to shoot in a straight line. Okay? Well, what if the Panzer tank is over there? What do you have to do? Did you ever try to turn a tank? Back up. Go forward. Is the tank still there? No, he's behind you, and you're about to get around through the back of your head. They were good. The Germans knew about tanks. They had generals like Hans Guderian, who were absolute geniuses, and a guy named Rommel, who we'll meet presently. Okay, what do we got here, Hayden? We got to get to the prison camp. That's the fun part. We were soldiers, so, one of my buddies was an artist, so he made drawings of all of the latrines we saw in France. Hayden saw one of these in Turkey several times. It's called a squatty potty. It's a hole in the ground with 2 places for your feet. So that's what soldiers do when they're bored, right? Draw toilets. Okay, what else we got? So all these things are actual things that I have that are going to go into the Library of Congress with the collection. Not quite sure what they'll do with the toilet one, but it's going to be in there. They'll find it. So this is Ike, right? Some of you guys might have heard of Ike. They call this an Ike jacket because he wore it. Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was a very young colonel. He was a clerk to MacArthur when this whole thing started in the Pacific. He was a bright guy. Most importantly, George Marshall, who was our head general, chief of staff of the Army, he liked Ike. Ike got a lot of flack because he was young and he was not experienced, especially in battle. And in fact, what do we got next here? He figures into the very first battle. This is Rommel I told you about, the Desert Fox. And I read a book of him in World War I. You can read when he was a young guy, and he was captain in infantry. This guy was smart. He was detailed in his planning. He was a technician. He was a tactician. He was great with a platoon of infantry. With an army of panzer tanks, he was invincible. He was smoking the 8th Army, the British 8th Army, with a force 3 times as large for almost 2 years in North Africa, which is why we ended up going to North Africa. Operation Torch, November 8th, 1942. These are what they had. This was their Tiger tank. Look at the difference. See how low it is? See how big that gun is? 88 millimeters. Look at the size of it. Look how long it is. And it's a rifle barrel, which means you can be very accurate. If one of our General Stuarts hit him from behind at the space of 10 feet, our shell would bounce off their armor because it was so thick. One of those tanks, at 1.75 miles, with a single round, they could incinerate one of our tanks. They called them Zippo lighters because they lit up every time. So a lot of my friends who were in tank crews died because of those tanks because they were so well made. They couldn't make as many of them, though, which is one of the reasons that we eventually won. We could produce Sherman tanks using our car factories in Detroit much faster than they could produce these because these were like handmade, like artisans. But at the time, that didn't matter to us because they were powerful. What else we got here, Hayden? So after Operation Torch was the invasion of northern Africa, we went into Algeria. We were there for a little bit. We got sent to the middle of nowhere, as you can see, in Tunisia. This is Jebel Qasira. This is Jebel Lesud, just 2 random hills in the middle of nowhere. Where was the commanding general? Mr. Lloyd Friedendahl. He was further away than Worcester would be today. He never even came into the country of Tunisia to see the front. He was busy having the engineers hollow out bits of a mountain so that he would be safe. Whereas actually we could have used those engineers because I can tell you we weren't safe on those hills. We had 2 battalions of infantrymen with our little single-shot rifles. They had 2 divisions of Panzer tanks. 3 Panzer tanks could have taken out our 2 little battalions. They had thousands, and they were battle-hardened. They had been in North Africa for years fighting in the Afrika Korps. They were smart. They were aggressive. They were tenacious. They could live for weeks. They were used to the desert air, right? We just got there. So it didn't end well. They came. What's our next slide? Okay, go back one. They came from over there, 6 o'clock in the morning, February 14th, 1943, Valentine's Day, but there wasn't anything romantic about it, I can tell you. They did what they call a double encirclement. One division went this way. One division went that way. They completely encircled both hills. By the end of the day, my entire regiment was either killed or captured. What happened to me? Well, I was in the band, right? Doesn't matter what you do. In a battle, everyone's a soldier. So I had a Browning automatic rifle, which is actually a really excellent bit of kit. I was leaning up against a rock. All of a sudden, I heard a crack, and I leaned up, and click, the bullet fell on the ground that had lodged between my neck and the rock. And I was dazed, and again, adrenaline starts flowing. You don't actually feel pain. But the back of my jacket was all ripped up, and it looked awful. It really wasn't awful, but I was bleeding. So I went to the first aid station. The guy said, "You've got to stay here. You're wounded. You need to be treated." So, we can hear the battle going on. There's probably 24 people at the first aid station. And all of a sudden, we look and realize there's no one else here. Like, wait, what? No, we were left. Everybody else was gone. In fact, the general, not the big general who was still in the next country, right, in his hollowed-out cave, but a general that had been temporarily put in charge of us, he said, "Stand fast. Stand to the last man. Do not give up your post." And then he took a pair of scissors. This actually happened. Cut the cord. He drove off in the other direction, back towards the other general in the next country, right? Through the Kasserine Pass. And we actually found, we couldn't figure out why we couldn't communicate with the general, and then we found this cord that had been cut with a pair of scissors, which we didn't think was all that courageous and professional. But strange things happen in battle. Brings out the best, brings out the worst. Sometimes the least likely people are the best soldiers, right? Often you think of soldiers as, big and macho and tough and, ready to take. A lot of times they're the worst in a battle. Sometimes it's guys that are quiet, small, determined, bright, right? Know how to find cover, right? Understand zones of fire so you can get out of them. A lot of times those are guys that actually end up being really good soldiers. It's interesting. I find humans interesting. So that was it. It's the Battle of Faid Pass. It was the first battle in a long series of engagements that became known as the Battle of Kasserine Pass, because Rommel's army, once they blew through there, they kept charging for another 40 miles, and they did some serious damage before they were finally stopped. A lot of things went wrong because we were new to the war, right? It wasn't because we were dumb. Wasn't because we were cowards. Partially because we were new to the war. It takes a while to get geared up, right? Right? Some of these other countries had been fighting for not just for 3 or 4 years, but years before that in things like the Spanish Civil War, honing tactics, developing close air support for troops. That was a new thing back then. I mean, now, in Afghanistan and Iraq, happens every day, right? Important part of battle. Then it was a brand new concept, and the Germans were brilliant. The Prussians were absolutely fabulous soldiers, and they realized that with a combination of tanks providing armor support, planes providing air support, that a single soldier could be as effective as 10, right? And they honed all those techniques for all the war. We were just starting out. Doesn't mean we didn't fight, right? We grew up in the country. We knew how to shoot a gun. We could kill a rabbit at 400 yards. So, we held our own as best we could. But, it was like the first grade, Little League team here going up against the Red Sox. We were absolutely decimated, destroyed in one day. So next slide, this is how we got out. There was a guy in the unit that was a mechanic, because we couldn't get the ambulances started. They were the only way out, right? He said, I know how to hotwire a car. Anybody know how to hotwire a car? Don't let your parents see you raise your hand. Okay. It's actually pretty easy. You take these two wires, you touch them together, and the engine goes, vroom! So we had two of those things. We hotwired them. We hit the road. They call it the fog of battle. It's total chaos, right? You can't hear anything. You can't see anything. There's smoke. There's flame. We just got on the road, and we hightailed out of there as fast as we could, directly through the enemy front lines. Oopsie. Yeah, that was not well planned. Fortunately, I spoke a little bit of German. I recognized the sign for a German field hospital, a Krankenhaus, right? And we said, well, this battle is lost. What can you do? At some point, you turn yourself in, right? So that's what we did. The German doctors were pretty confused as to why we drove ambulances into their hospital. But as I say, funny things happen in battle. So what do we got next there, Hayden? This is how we got flown from Tunisia over to mainland, to the tip of the boot in Italy. Then next one, we got taken by train. So we first attacked here, right, Algeria. The battle was over here in Tunisia. We were taken up there, and I can tell you, everybody else in our unit that was not in the ambulances, they had to walk that whole way, right? That's like walking from here to Portland, Maine. They hadn't had food for 2 days. They had no water. Many of them were injured. And I got to tell you, till the day I died, I felt so guilty about that, right? Because I was riding in a train. And you'll find that a lot of soldiers, especially the ones that lived through the battle like I did, have what they call survivor's guilt. Because so many of our friends from high school, just like you guys, like the guy, look to the guy next to you. Look to your left. All right? Now look to your other left. Now look to your right. See these people? These are your friends, right? People you go to school with, you see every day. These were my friends. And they were gone. Fortunately, there were enough of us left that we could form a little band. Band literally. We were in the band, right? So this is where we were taken first. That's Stalag 12A, just outside of the town of Munich, where, again, my son and his wife visited with some family members back in the 90s. There's a few things left of it. After that, we went up to another prison camp, Fürstenberg an der Oder, up here, a little farther up. It's in the border of what's now Poland, and we were there a very long time. So let's see. I see some yawning, so I'm going to speed this up. What do we got next there, Hayden? Some good things happened in prison camp, some bad things. Bad things were that people died. The bread we ate was made from tree flour. The calorie content was next to nothing. It's like eating a tree, right? It's all cellulose. There's no carbohydrates. There's no protein. There's no anything. So, every day or so, one of us would die. This is also in the stuff. This is in the order for a funeral. Because we might be in prison camp, but we were still humans. We were still part of an army. And we would bury our friends. We would take care of them, and we would give them a proper service. So we typed up a service of burial for each one, and we had a proper funeral for each one. So that's something we still have. Go on, Hayden. What's next? So remember at the very beginning I said I became a Protestant chaplain. I wasn't trained as a minister. I hadn't gone to a seminary. My granddaddy actually was a hillbilly preacher in the Ozarks. Remember, I grew up in the Ozarks. But I wrote back to my church in Iowa, and I said, can you guys give me a license for preaching the gospel? They said, sure. So this is my exhorter's license. See, Sergeant Richard Gray. So we've got that today, too. And so that let me preach, and I preached every single week for almost 2.5 years there in the prison camp. Go ahead. That's me, Dick Gray. Uh-oh. Anything dangerous? Is that fire alarm? No? Okay, all right, fair enough. That's all right. I've been through worse. A friend of mine, there's lots of people that are musical, also are sometimes creative with the visual arts, drawing. So a friend of mine was an artist. He drew that picture of me. Another friend of mine was a poet. He wrote this poem about me, which I thought was very nice. I was kind of embarrassed by the whole thing. But we put it in the camp newspaper. We published a newspaper. And that's an actual sheet from the camp newspaper. I don't know where we got this stuff. Where did we find paper? We made it, right? We'd take a cardboard box. We'd boil it down. We'd press the paper. You got a lot of time as a prisoner. We made our own ink. We did our own typesetting. Can you believe that? And this thing, which is printed on something, who knows what this paper was made out of? Squirrel tails, I don't know, bits of cardboard box. We still have this piece of paper. It's all part of that same collection. Just with that one little tear in it. And you see the same jacket? The Ike jacket. Okay, hit me. These are some of the letters and telegrams I wrote home. What do you do when you're still a teenager? You're basically a big boy. You're thousands of miles away from home. You write to Mom. And you say, Mom, can you send some candy or anything? So I wrote to Mom, and I wrote about 100 telegrams and letters, and we got that whole book of them. So that's just a few of them. What else we got there, Hayden? So in the prison camp, we played the band, right? We had a baseball team. We had uniforms. We made our own uniforms for everything. That's me over here. You see there playing the clarinet? So we had the seventh inning stretch, and we tried to recreate. Right, you try to make life as normal as you can, like as if you were back home, right? We love baseball, like Hayden here. So why not? We had our own baseball season. What's next? What else did we do? We put on full-scale Broadway musicals. First, we made a concert. They gave us a building. We made a concert hall. We made a sanctuary. We made a library. We put on full-scale musicals with costumes, with makeup, with programs. We did all that stuff. We were not going to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves. That just wasn't what we did in our generation. I mean, if my son was over there, Hayden's dad, he'd probably been feeling sorry for himself the whole time. But that's not what we did. And do you notice anything about this cast? What do you notice? Yeah. Even the ones that look like women. In fact, they're all white boys because the Army then was still segregated, right? A lot of the Army was based in the South back then. These are all white boys. And in fact, my family couldn't find me for a long time in this picture. Not so much because I was dressed as a woman, but because they weren't used to seeing me as an African American. That's me right there. Would you recognize me? I was Julie. That was Showboat. I was Julie. It was a lot of fun. You had to do things that were fun or you would go out of your mind. What else do we got? Well, you can't, we've pixelated there. I don't know, we had some technical difficulties. This is a combat infantryman's badge. You see it right here? Kentucky long rifle. We live in Boston, right? This is one of the things that won the war, the original war, the Revolutionary War, Kentucky long rifle. And it could be only given to infantrymen, foot soldiers, and you had to be in a battle. So it doesn't matter if you're General Eisenhower with 5 stars, he doesn't get the CIB. Only someone who's carried a rifle in a battle. Because as an infantryman, you don't get much else. You don't get much glory. You don't get much pay. And it's unbelievably dangerous, right? The casualty rate they call them grunts these days, for the guys carrying soldiers, carrying rifles in battle, off the charts. So they said, we are going to have one badge that only they can get. And that's what that is. So if you ever see anybody, they'll be proud of that one, more proud than any of the medal they have. Right. What's next, my friend? That's it. As I said, I could go on forever, but that was the story. We were in there. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are very kind. Not